Hello, everyone. Welcome to the broadcast. Today marks day one of our conversation on trauma, resilience, and healing. So, we're going to take a look at how trauma affects the way that we interact with others. In this video, we're really going to try to key in on how our past traumas affect the way that we interact and discipline our children. I have parents all the time. They come to me and they want to know what is wrong with my child. And I try to get them to kind of reframe their thinking around that concept of thinking that something is wrong with their child and try to ask themselves what happened to my child, or even better, what happened to me. Because a lot of times the things that happen to us in our past affect the way we parent our children and the way that we discipline and the way that we see their behaviors. So, Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry, they have a wonderful book titled What Happened to Me, and it's very good. I want to share a bit of that book with you all. Afterwards, we'll have a little conversation or discussion about it in the comments. So, let me go ahead and get that pulled up right now. Let's just do it like this.
"Stop your crying," she would warn. "You better hush your mouth." My face settled into stoic. My heart stopped racing, biting hard into my lower lip so no words would escape me. "I do this because I love you," she'd repeat her defense in my ear. As a young girl, I was whipped regularly. At the time, it was accepted practice for caregivers to use corporal punishment to discipline a child. My grandmother, Hattie Mae, embraced it. But even at 3 years old, I knew that what I was experiencing was wrong. One of the worst beatings I recall happened on a Sunday morning. Going to church played a major role in our lives. Just before we were to leave for service, I was sent to the well behind our house to pump water. The farmhouse where I lived with my grandparents did not have indoor plumbing. From the window, my grandmother caught a glimpse of me twirling my fingers in the water and became enraged. Though I was only daydreaming innocently, as any child might, she was angry because this was our drinking water and I had put my fingers in it. She then asked me if I'd been playing in the water, and I said, "No." She bent me over and whipped me so violently, my flesh welted. Afterward, I managed to put on my white Sunday best dress. Blood began to seep through and stain the crisp fabric, a deep crimson. Livid at the sight, she chastised me for getting blood on my dress, then sent me to Sunday school. In the rural South, this is how black children were raised. There wasn't anyone I knew who wasn't whipped. I was beaten for the slightest reasons: spilled water, a broken glass, the inability to keep quiet or still. I heard a black comedian once say, "The longest walk is to get your own switch." Well, I not only had to walk to get the switch, but if there wasn't one available, I had to go find one. A thin, young branch worked best, but if it was too thin, I'd have to braid 2 or 3 together to make it stronger. My grandmother often forced me to help her braid the switch. Sometimes the whippings would get saved up for Saturday night, when I was naked and freshly bathed. Afterwards, when I could barely stand, she would tell me to wipe that pout off your face and to start smiling. Bury it as though it never happened. Eventually, I developed a keen sense of when trouble was brewing. I recognized the shift in my grandmother's voice, or the look, that meant I had displeased her. She was not a mean person. I believe she cared for me and wanted me to be a good girl, and I understood that hushing my mouth or silence was the only way to ensure a quick end to punishment and pain. For the next 40 years, that pattern of conditioned compliance, the result of deeply rooted trauma, would define every relationship, interaction, and decision in my life. The long-term impact of being whipped, then forced to hush and even smile about it, turned me into a world-class people-pleaser for most of my life. It would not have taken me half a lifetime to learn to set boundaries and say no with confidence had I been nurtured differently. As an adult, I'm grateful to enjoy long-term, consistent, loving relationships with many people. Yet, the early beatings, emotional fractures, and splintered connections that I experienced with the central figures in my young life, no doubt helped develop my solitary independence.
All right, so Oprah shared her experience growing up as a young black girl in the South, and I know a lot of people had similar experiences to hers with the getting whoopings, being told to hush. Me personally, I don't think I ever got whoopings like that, but a lot of my family members and friends, and that I know, they can't recall getting beatings like that, and very few of them do that to their children now. But even though we don't necessarily whoop and beat our children like maybe we've experienced in the past, just the simple fact that it happened to us affects the way that we parent and interact with our spouses, the way that we connect with others in our community, at work, on our jobs, just relationships in general. And better understanding trauma and how the brain works is going to help you to make better connections, and be more patient and understanding with your child. Every child develops at their own rate, at their own speed. So if you have multiple children, you can't compare the oldest to the youngest. You can't say, well, my oldest was potty trained at this age. What's wrong with my youngest? Everyone develops at different times. So back to trauma. Trauma is something that we have to acknowledge. It happens, and things that we may not see as trauma, once we are better trauma informed, we will understand that we have experienced or been through trauma in some form or fashion in our lives. So I do have, let's see, I think I have some talking points that I wanted to hit on. Yeah, I do. Let me bring those up. Give me 1 second. Let's get it. All right, so the key idea of Oprah's book, if you have not read the book, is called What Happened to You, and it's by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry. You can check it out on Audible. You can check it out, I think it's on Amazon. Any bookstore may have it. It's a really good book. I give it a 5 out of 5. So the first key idea is our brains are shaped by our unique childhood experiences. This is kind of like a summary of the book. I'm not going to try to read it all. If you would like to read the summary, I'll just send me a direct message and I'll send you a link so that you can read the entire summary. But I highlighted some key points and ideas that I wanted to share with you all, that may help you in your relationships. All right. So, key point number one, our brains are shaped by our unique childhood experiences. The rational part of a child's brain, the cortex, takes years to develop, about 3 years to be exact. People sometimes think this means that young children don't absorb much, and that abuse and trauma experienced by a 2 year old doesn't count. But the opposite is true. In fact, younger children In fact, the younger a child is, the more damaging trauma is for their brain. A baby's brain develops at an astounding 20,000 new neurons per second, and every experience is logged in a personal code book in the brain. Later, traumatic experience may manifest as complex memories that can't be understood rationally. So, your child may not be able to recall a negative experience or traumatic experience in a verbal manner, like put it into a conversation, but the negative experience or the trauma can manifest later and just be, just a feeling of just a negative overall feeling. And I have to tell some of my parents that I work with, when they want to express themselves about, like, say for instance, their partner, their child's father or mother, the other parent that's not there, not involved, and I would say, like, please don't say this thing in front of the child, because they, even though you think that they might not understand what it is that you're saying, it still affects them in a negative way. And sooner or later, they will start to understand that you're talking negatively about their mother or their father. So that's a potential traumatic experience that you might be putting on your child if you're not careful. So let's keep rolling. We got a couple of points that I wanted to hit on before we get to our next video. Um, you can't treat trauma without understanding how the brain works. I touched on that briefly. It gets a little complex in describing the workings of the brain, but like I said, if you want to read the whole summary, I'll send you the information. All right, the third talking point is learning positive regulation strategies is essential for dealing with trauma. Let's see. I didn't highlight any of this, so let's keep moving. There's one thing that I wanted to speak on. This section right here is talking about anything that puts you in your natural rhythm is going to be helpful with dealing with trauma. Things like walking, dancing, singing, anything that has a rhythm to it is going to help with trauma. Even like getting massages, that's a really good one. All right, let's see what's going on. Learning how to form positive relationships. Let's see. Okay, so this is a good talking point. It says learning how to form positive relationships is key to healing trauma. But cruelly, the people who most need social connections often lack the skills to build them. Think of a child in the classroom seeking attention by acting out, or someone whose experiences have been so negative that they disconnect in social settings. The good news is, okay, they're talking about Gloria. It was a story about a young lady that you would have to read the book or the summary to get. But basically, what it's saying is that our brains are plastic. It's called neuroplasticity, basically saying that you can create new pathways in your brain based on different experiences. And they also use this term, neurons that fire together, wire together. So you can basically train your brain and teach your brain new ways of dealing with trauma. I'm trying to keep this interesting. I don't want to feel like we're in class, but let's see. To build resilience, the challenge needs to match the child. It should be a healthy stretch, but not an impossible feat. All right, stress can help build resilience in the right dose. So basically, this part of the summary is telling us to not shy completely away from letting our children experience stress, and not all stress is considered trauma. It has to match up with the child's abilities. We don't want to put our children in impossible situations. Now, yeah, I don't want to get too deep into that, but like if your child has like ADHD or any type of um, thing that they're going to need assistance with, it's good to go ahead and get them those accommodations and assistance, because if you set your child up, put them in a situation that stretch them beyond their capabilities, in certain situations, it can be a negative thing, and it would, they would fall behind in school. They could get, picked on, different things like that, and it could end up being a traumatic experience for them. Let's keep going. I don't want to talk about that right now. All right, so I did highlight this. It says that we all need support from our communities to heal. Not only support from therapists or our families, but our schools, our workplace, the justice system, and our places of worship. We need trauma-informed communities with the right support. We can all learn how to live with trauma and draw post-traumatic wisdom from our experiences. I really think that that is true. We need to raise awareness of trauma, what it is, and just overall mental health. And break stigmas associated with mental health, with seeking help from counselors and having mentors. Wealthy people have coaches, mentors, and advisors all the time. It should be a thing that everyone has. I spoke with a parent today. I just met someone randomly as I was shopping today, and I, introduced them. I introduced myself to them and told them that I was a therapeutic male mentor, and that I would like to see if their son needed any mentoring services. And she said, "Well, I don't think that he needs mentoring services because he's 16 now and he has a job." And I was able to tell her, just take my car anyway, because just because your child turns 16 and gets a driver's license and gets his first job, that doesn't mean that they don't need a mentor, especially if they don't have a positive male role model in their lives. That's when our children need mentoring the most, when they are transitioning into adulthood, and they have their driver's license and a car. They're going different places and doing different things. Certain things they're not going to want to tell mom about, and that's why it would be good to have a mentor to run different things by. So, we can prevent you from doing this thing that, it's just going to cost you in the long run. So, even if you're 21, you're 19, 20, 21, you can still benefit from having a mentor. I'm 37. I benefit from having a mentor. So if you're headed in a certain direction and there's someone that's already where you're headed, it's best to just be mentored by the person that is where you're trying to go. There's no shame in having a mentor. Like, in the not so distant past, that was the thing, to be an apprentice or to learn from someone who already knew what it is that you were doing. So I know I was gonna get hung up, but let's keep going. In summary, I'll just read this summary again. I want you guys to check the book out for yourselves, but also let's just get through the summary. So it says traumatic experiences literally transform our brains, especially when we're very young. They affect how we respond to stress, how quickly we bounce back from adversity. While we can't erase traumatic experiences, we can cultivate resilience in the face of them by developing our connections to other people and learning positive strategies for regulation. We can train our brains to respond differently to triggers. Trauma isn't an individual pathology, it's a result of destructive experiences such as racism and poverty. As a society, we need to address trauma together. All right, so let's move right on along. I have this video prepared for us, and we'll just wrap it up with some comments. Let's go.
Brain development is much more than a story about biology. From the earliest years, relationships with others play a key role in shaping how our brain grows and develops. Early relationships, where there is abuse and neglect, have a long-term impact on children. A brain that has adapted to survive in a threatening or unpredictable world may not work so well in an ordinary environment. This can create what is called latent vulnerability, where early abusive or neglectful experiences with carers put children at greater risk of experiencing mental health problems in the future. For these children, compared to their peers, common experiences like moving to a new school can feel more daunting and stressful. New faces can appear threatening, while positive social cues can be missed. It can be harder to negotiate new social situations and learn to trust new people. Even fun experiences like joining a new sports team can be challenging. Too much focus on potential threat cues can mean missing out on positive social cues such as a playful nudge. Or it causes an overreaction, which leads to an increased risk of conflict and sometimes violence. These reactions can increase the likelihood of generating new stressful events. It's harder to deal with everyday challenges when you feel unconfident and anxious inside, and harder to build and maintain relationships. Over time, this can mean a child loses friends and the support of adults, and so misses out on opportunities to grow and develop. This social thinning can increase the risk of mental health problems in the future. Neuroscience research is beginning to shed new light on how vulnerability unfolds over a child's life. All children need care and stimulation from adults who value them and who show them attention and love. These experiences shape a child's brain development. When children face traumatic experiences like abuse and neglect, their brain adapts to help them cope. We know of changes in 3 different brain systems: the reward, memory, and threat systems. Experiences of domestic violence or physical abuse can lead to hypervigilance, where the brain reacts more to threat. This might help a child stay safe in an early adverse environment, but it can cause problems in more ordinary environments. Hypervigilance can best be understood as a pattern of adaptation rather than a sign of damage. Abuse and neglect can also mean a world where a child's basic needs for care and attention are not met. This can shape the brain's reward system, the part of the brain that helps us learn about positive aspects of our environment and motivates our behaviour. Over time, the brain's reward system can learn to respond differently to things like positive social cues. Neuroscience studies have also pointed to changes in the autobiographical memory system, our memory of everyday past experiences. Following trauma, negative memories appear to become more salient, which means they become more prominent than positive ones. And everyday memories can also become less detailed. This is a problem because we need to draw on past experiences to help us deal with new social situations. Neuroscience research is showing how childhood trauma can create latent vulnerability, increasing the risk of later mental health problems like anxiety and depression. This vulnerability is not just located in the child, but arises through their relationships. Helping children who have experienced trauma still requires ordinary boundaries and consequences, but it also requires us to step back and reflect and see behaviour that we find challenging in a different light. A child may simply be doing their best to survive now, with brain adaptations from the past. We know a child's brain has the capacity to continue to adapt. For this to happen, they need our help to build and maintain trusted relationships, manage everyday stresses, and prevent new ones from happening. We need to encourage them to try again and believe things can be different. This is far from an easy task and takes time. Science is helping reframe our understanding of childhood trauma. Seeing children's behaviour in a new light can mean we respond differently. But there is much still to learn. Working together, we can develop more effective approaches that promote resilience and recovery. We can help children build trusting relationships and create opportunities for their brains to adapt in new ways.
All right, so let's get my mic back on. Okay. So what did you all think about that information? That's something to really think about, that, the way that we're brought up, the way that we're raised, the attention that we get, we don't get, whether we have two parents in the house, one parent in the house, whether it was domestic abuse in the house, whether you got whoopings or not. All these things affect the way that our brain developed. So we're just touching the surface on this conversation about trauma, resilience, and healing. We hope to hear back from you all and read some interesting comments. You can send us an email or direct message if you have any specific questions that you would like answered. We try our best to get to those. And if you want to schedule like a consultation with a licensed therapist or counselor, or schedule mentoring services, you can give us a call. We'll be glad to work with you. And another thing that I'm finding is really popular is just working with the parents one on one, aside from, just treating the children, but helping the parent to understand what's going on. And I don't want to keep, and I don't want to make this video too long, but um, I'm seeing a pattern of parents that come in and they bring their child and they say, my child is doing this behavior, that behavior, and another behavior. And when we work with them one on one, we don't see the behaviors. So obviously, that child is either saving that behavior specifically for their parent, or something about their home environment where they feel like they're gonna behave differently at home, or it could be the parenting style. So if you're experiencing some things that you don't quite understand with your teens, preteens, or even your younger child, give us a call. It never hurts to get an opinion on what's going on. And we're not perfect, as far as when it comes to parenting. No one knows everything, and everyone's child is different, and everyone's parenting style is different. But what we like to do is just you know help to make sure that everyone is moving in a positive direction. So I'm going to end it right there. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys on the next video.